Test 1, 2. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. We are about to get rolling this morning. Thank you for joining us, all of you who are here. The place, for those of you at home, is packed. I mean, there's barely, no, I'm just kidding. There's plenty of room. If you want to come to class, we can social distance you like crazy. And so if you want to ease back into things, that would be an awesome way to do it. Come to class, and then you can watch worship from home if you're not comfortable with being in a large group. But just an idea, throwing it at you. I know we're all trying to just make it through this and do the best we can. So for those of you at home, welcome. We're glad you're here. We have a lot of things going on in the next few weeks. Y'all know that we've just started 2 other new adult classes at each end of the building, both of them studying Romans 13. And there's a lot of, this morning they're discussing fear and respect and authority, and that sounds interesting. I almost stayed down there and listened. But they're doing that on both ends of the building, different teachers, same topic, but you should get different perspectives. And then after worship this morning is our annual corporate meeting. And if you're having trouble going to sleep, you need to hang around. No, I'm just kidding. It is exciting, and it's an opportunity. Come on in, guys. It's cool. The college students are joining us. I gave them the choice that they could go to any adult class or stay down there and do their own thing. And they chose us because we're better than everybody else. But thank you, guys. You make me feel important. Anyway, we're just getting started. I'm rattling on about nothing. Corporate meeting after church today. Next week, though, after worship, is the annual Sanctity of Life fundraiser for the Care Center. If you aren't familiar with that, next Sunday, Mackenzie's Barbecue, which never is open on Sunday, will be open, and they will be providing a barbecue sandwich lunch for a small donation, and if you swing by there, it will go to support the Care Center. And if you don't know what the Care Center does, that is worth talking to some people about. They'll give you some information about that. It is a very worthwhile cause and something that we want to support, and so I'm starting ahead of time.
The lunch is free, but all the donations go to the Care Center.
Jerry said, reminded me, the lunch is free, but all the donations go to the Care Center. And so if you want to hit us up on that, or hit up on that next week, college students, that's a good time to just sidle up beside somebody, because you'll get a lunch, because we're going to go donate anyway. So good way to get you hooked up. This morning, as we move into Genesis 40, we've been in Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now we're in Joseph's life, and Joseph is in a unique place. He has been up and down and all over the place. He is, at the top when he is given the coat of many colors, or this symbol of authority, by his father. His brothers are, of course, jealous because of that, as well as his dreams that he shares with them when he talks about how he is in this dream they were going to come and bow down to him, and obviously that didn't go over real well. And so they threw him in a cistern. They debated whether they were going to kill him. They sold him into slavery, and the people that they sold him to carried him down to Egypt, sold him again to the captain of the guard, a guy named Potiphar, and he's working for Potiphar once again. He rises to the top. He is blessed by God. That's what the Bible tells us, that's why he is successful. And he is so successful, he's put in charge of all of Potiphar's affairs. And Potiphar's wife makes some advances towards Joseph, because the Bible tells us Joseph is a good-looking young man. And Potiphar's wife makes some advances towards Joseph, which he rejects. And she, in turn, in anger, accuses him of wrongdoing, and therefore he is sent to jail. And that's where we are right now. But I want to talk about being disappointed, because Joseph is in a place where he's disappointed. And we all have stories where we were disappointed by something. I can tell you that the Christmas that I stopped writing letters to Santa, because I had this Star Wars AT-AT Walker playset that I wanted. If you don't know what that is, it's the big walker things with the 4 legs in the Star Wars movies. And this was what I wanted more than anything else. And so I wrote a letter to Santa, and I went and sat on Santa's lap, and I told him what I wanted, and I was just sure that that was what was going to be under the tree. Well, I didn't know at the time, but those things were ridiculously expensive, and my parents were doing the best they could to try to make ends meet, and that was not in the cards. And so, therefore, it was not under the tree, and I was highly disappointed. And that was when I stopped writing letters to Santa, because I figured he wasn't going to come through anyway. We've all got those stories about being disappointed, but what about being disappointed with God? What about being disappointed with God? You pray and pray and pray for something, and for whatever reason, it doesn't come through. We all have, disappointments in life, but if we're honest, there are times when we've been disappointed with God, because we pray and pray and pray about something, and we're sure that God has heard that prayer and He's going to bless that, and then for whatever reason that we may never understand this side of heaven, it doesn't come to fruition, and we're left disappointed. And for some people, this becomes a major crisis of faith. I remember when I was a youth minister, we had the town that I was serving in was a small town in the panhandle of Texas, and this town was really, it was one of the young ladies who was a star of the popular kid at the high school, and her family was very prominent in the community, not wealthy kind of prominent, just well known, and she came down with cancer. And when she was diagnosed with that cancer, of course, all the youth groups in town, all the churches prayed, and they did big prayer vigils and things. And after a time, she went into remission. And so there was great celebration. There was great, everybody was really fired up about that until about a year later when it came back. And as a youth minister dealing with teenagers who are young and inexperienced in their faith, it was hard, because how do you explain that to them? They were sure that God had heard and answered that prayer, and then here we are back again. Well, what happened? And that's a hard question to answer if we're honest, because I don't know. I don't know why God does what He does. Now, there's a lot of people who will offer you a lot of platitudes and a lot of cute little sayings and things like that. But the truth is, we don't know. The greatest example, the greatest lesson about that is, of course, Job. And you remember, we grew up hearing about the patience of Job, but what we don't hear is the rest of the story, that Paul Harvey would say, that Job, after he's beset with all these things, and his friends tell him to curse God and die, and his wife tells him to curse God and die, and he finally gets mad, and he yells, to heaven, God, I want to take you to court. I want to sue you. I want you to come down here and face me in a court of law. And God does, and God appears and talks to him. And so you're thinking Job's going to get some answers now. Now, we as the reader have been given the behind-the-scenes glimpse. We know what's going on, right? But Job doesn't. And he's really, Lord, I'm mad at you. I don't understand why this is happening to me. Why don't you explain this? And you know what God's answer is? When you can hang a moon, then you get to ask questions. When you can make a whale, then you can ask some questions. Until then, you just need to be quiet. And we don't like that. That's not a good answer. That's not what we want to hear. We want to hear this big cosmic explanation, and God says, look, I'm God, you're not. You need to trust that. Joseph is in that place. And he is in that place in Genesis 40. His brothers have sold him into slavery. There's no hope on the horizon. But through his hard work, integrity, and the blessings of God, he rises to the top in Potiphar's house. He is then put in jail. And in jail, you know that Joseph is praying, God, deliver me from this. God, hear my prayer. God, answer my prayer. And then we don't know how much time passed, but we know that there are two new prisoners who are introduced into the jail with Joseph. The Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker. Now, these are important men in Pharaoh's court. The cupbearer was, of course, the guy who he brought the king his drink. And his job was to taste of that drink and make sure that it wasn't poisoned. And if he took a drink and didn't die, then Pharaoh would drink. Now, that sounds like a really ludicrous job, but that was a really, really important job. Because Pharaoh had to have the ultimate trust in this guy. Because if anybody could poison Pharaoh, it was this guy. And if somebody wanted to assassinate Pharaoh, this guy was the way you went, because he was the gateway to access. And so the king, whoever it is, even if it's not Pharaoh, later on Nehemiah is the same thing. And the king has to have the utmost trust in this guy. And so that guy is important. The baker was not just, some guy making donuts. He was the guy who kind of was over a lot of the food that was produced and served at Pharaoh's table. And remember, in those societies, everybody didn't have an oven in the kitchen. And so baking was not like we think of baking, mom baking an apple pie on an afternoon. It was an all-day affair. To make a loaf of bread, they started at 5 o'clock in the morning so that they could have bread at dinner time. It took a lot of work. It was a labor-intensive. It was not an easy thing. So these guys, for whatever reason, are in prison. Terry, sorry. Absolutely.
I would submit that if Potiphar believed his wife, that he'd have just taken a dagger and the slave he's done.
Yeah.
In that day and age, with him in his position, Joseph in his position, even if he's the head servant, he's done. But I don't believe that Potiphar truly believes his wife, because he puts him in prison. He's not made mincemeat.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph, in order to do the job that God has for him to do in the end, he needs two things. He needs to know agriculture, and he needs to know politics. And he's gotten the experience in agriculture at Potiphar's house. Now he needs to know politics, and that's what he's going to get in this political prison.
Very good. Very good. Folks at home, sorry. I can't sum all that up, but basically, God is still blessing Joseph because even as he is going to being incarcerated, that God is still watching over him. Terry pointed out that it's possible that Potiphar did not totally believe the allegations because a slave is worthless and is a piece of property and not really a human being. And so if he had totally believed that, he would have just killed him and been done with it. The fact that he does incarcerate him and keep him around shows that there is some bit of doubt, maybe, or at least that Joseph is too valuable an asset to just totally cast aside. Now, remember, we've talked about the value of women in those societies, and so even now in the Middle East, in most places, it takes the testimony of 5 women to equal the testimony of 1 man, and so there's a little bit of that in there as well. There's also, and I don't want to go down rabbit trails and talk about trivia too much, but there is also a theory that some of the translations in 39, at the end of 39, are not totally precise, and that instead of being in a prison, that he is perhaps under lockdown still in Potiphar's care. The reason they do that is because look at the beginning of 40. It talks about them being in the, he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard. Well, who's the captain of the guard? It just told us that was Potiphar. But then it says in the same verse, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. Now, so the idea of prison may have been a dungeon, it may have been a cell, it may have been a shack out back where he kept the prisoners. We don't know, but it's possible, verse 4, the captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. It's possible that Joseph is still under the care of Potiphar in some way. We don't have that specifically said, and so that's one of those trivial things that doesn't really change anything, but it's interesting Bible nerd stuff. So after they'd been in custody, each of the 2 men have a dream, and verse 6, when Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there's no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." Now, I think this is interesting because Joseph gets a bad rep under some people as being arrogant. That there is a school of thought that says Joseph was arrogant with his brothers and Joseph was arrogant in... I don't see that. I see this naive kid who, he just is like, well, God interprets. Our interpretations belong to God. Tell me, and I can't interpret it for you, but I know a guy who can. It's kind of like I'm not. I don't think it's as much arrogance really as it is kind of an innocence. He's like, well, let me talk to God for you. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's really like. Let's bring it before God. So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. "In my dream, I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches, and as soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." "This is what it means," Joseph said to him. "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position. And you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, when this happens, remember me and show me kindness, mention me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I've done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, "Well, I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kind of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." "Well, this is what that means," Joseph said. 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away your flesh." Now, that dude's wishing he'd never asked. But the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday. He gave a feast for all his officials. We're in verse 20. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hands. But he impaled the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. So this is what I mean by disappointment. Joseph says to him in verse 14, when all goes well with you, when this dream comes to fruition, this dream that you just had that I interpreted for you, not if this happens. Joseph is totally, supremely confident that what God has shown him is legit. When this happens, don't forget about me. Don't forget to mention me to Pharaoh. And you can almost hear, as those 3 days happen and the cupbearer is being released, it's not in here, but you can almost hear him being like, just hang on, Joseph. I'm going to get you, buddy. I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to talk. You'll hear something. It's going to be okay. Everything's going to be all right. And Joseph had to have these really, really high hopes at that moment, I think. I would. Right? You've been praying and praying and praying. God gives you these visions. You use these visions to get a favorable report with these people, and mention me to Pharaoh. And this guy, I'm going back to the thing. I'm gonna take care of you. And he goes off, and Joseph's got to he's got to be psyched. It's going to happen any day now. Maybe he gets up every morning and rolls up his bedroll. Because I'm not going to sleep here tonight. I got to be ready to go. And nothing happens. And you keep doing that. And you keep doing that. You keep doing that until finally you start to realize it ain't happening. Have we ever been there? I see some heads nodding, but I'm not going to ask you to publicly talk about that unless you want to. But it's I think we've all experienced something like that. Where we're just sure that things are going to happen. We're just sure that things are going to go a certain way. We're just sure that everything's going to be great. And then nothing happens. And there are a few things that I think we have to learn from this. And one of those is that God sometimes uses disappointment as much as he uses blessing. Joseph, in his time of blessing, as God blesses him and he rises to the top, is he less blessed here? No. It doesn't say that God left him and that's why he was in jail, right? But so Joseph is not in any way out of God's favor. We have this idea, and it's throughout Scripture that it is over and over kind of refuted. But it like we were talking about Job, it's a lot like Job's friends. Job's friends say, well, you must have done something. I don't know what you did, but you must have done something to make God mad. And even if we don't say that, I think in the back of our minds we still have that idea. You must have done something. There's a reason you're here. You right? And maybe we don't want to talk about that because we don't want to admit that we think that, but we do. There's a little bit in there where we're like, well, you must have done something to make God mad. There's a reason you're here. But it's not always the case. Joseph, we know, is innocent. He has done nothing to deserve this, but yet here he is. And he is in this place of despair, of loneliness, of incarceration, of disappointment through no fault of his own. And sometimes God uses those disappointments to get our attention, or to make us totally dependent on him, or to make us realize that maybe we're not all that. I mean, it's real easy when, you'll hear people when they're struggling, I need prayer, I need to ask God for this. And you very rarely hear people glorifying and saying, well, God, God gave me all this. I'm not judging anybody because I'm just as guilty as anybody else. But sometimes it's like there's an old C.S. Lewis quote where C.S. Lewis said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but God whispers in our successes and screams in our disappointments. And because we're more apt to hear that when we're in that place. Yes, go. Absolutely. And Brenda, you do a great job. I've said this publicly, but I really, I'm not just blowing smoke at you. I think you do a good job of giving God the glory and of crediting Him. And that's something that we all got to get better at. Because, especially, I mean, we're Texans. And we're kind of independent, We only joined the union because they needed help, and I've been giving Hunter problems all week because he's a Okie, and those of you at home, we hired a new youth minister. If you don't know that, Hunter Gooden, he's from Oklahoma, and we were talking about the difference between pride and arrogance, and Texans are all arrogant. Well, no, we're just proud. You don't ever see the Oklahoma State flag painted on top of a barn. I'm just saying. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. We're just proud. We're proud of who we are. And we're kind of independent, Jerry. Ooh. Jerry says, sometimes life is not fair. I'd say most times life is not fair, right? And if you've raised kids, you dealt with that, right? It's not fair. And sooner or later you learn that there ain't no such thing. Yes, ma'am. Even grandkids, yeah, it's not fair, and you're right, it's not, but such is life. It's not fair, and disappointments begin when our high hopes are not met in the way we expect. Right? I'm gonna get into a little Garth Brooks theology, but you know what I'm talking about. That some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. That's in your head right now, isn't it? You're singing it, you're here. But seriously, there's some truth to that. Because those of us who've lived a little bit, we can all look back and tell how there are things that we prayed fervently for that we really, really wanted that ended up different. And now we look back and see God's hand in that. John told a story at Mark and Dale's going away about them trying to get you hooked up with Delanese. And now we look at that and see that both of those ended up in the place where God wanted it, but at the moment you may not have known that. And that's important because we don't always get that, There's that one thing that we're really, really obsessed with or in love with or enamored with, or whether it's that relationship or that job or that house or that, you know what I mean? You know those people. I have friends who'll say, well, if I just get fill in the blank, then I'm going to be set and everything will be great. And they've been doing that since we were kids. If I just get this one job, everything's going to be set. I'm going to be great. If I just marry this one girl, I'm going to be set and everything's going to be great. If we just get this kid through college, I'm going to be set and everything will be great. If I just get this new house, I'm going to be set and everything. They've been doing that our whole life, as long as I've known them. And they're still waiting on that one thing that's going to get them set and everything's going to be great. Brenda and then Jason. There you go. And so, and in that, you can see the answer to prayer. But we also pray for things fervently that don't always come to fruition. Jason?
I know y'all can't see me because I have the mask on. I've been over here standing up for about the last 5 minutes. You keep saying that. All I can think of is sports teams.
Okay.
Y'all know I'm a huge Raider fan.
Right.
I was praying yesterday, and they lost.
I'm going to be praying tonight.
I know you are. So that was just my thing.
Right.
And it don't come true, and you know what? You got to live with it. You got to deal with it.
That's right. That's right. And we've all experienced that in some form or another. And sometimes the problem is not God. The problem is that our high hopes. The problem is that it's whatever's in my head, right? And God has a better plan. I think of it like again, it's like raising kids. And you remember when your kids wanted that one thing, and whatever that thing is that they think is so important, and you can see that maybe that's not the best thing for them. And it's a hard thing to do because, And that's not something you really need. And my kids have wanted a golf cart for 3 years. And they lobby about that, and they lobby about that, and now I got nothing against golf carts, but I live in a neighborhood where I see these teenagers driving through with like 45 kids hanging off a golf cart, and they take a corner and that thing's tilting over like this, and so I'm just stalling. I haven't said no. I'm just stalling. Don't tell them. But I'm going to stall long enough that we grow past that, because I really don't want that to happen. And maybe I'm wrong. I can live with being wrong, but that's how I'm handling this, because I don't know that that's the best thing for you. And so I'm just stalling. Sometimes that's how we do things. And I think sometimes God does the same thing. That may not be the best thing for you, and so you get a no instead of what you wanted. I think then the key, though, is how do we respond to that? Because that disappointment, while common to life, how I handle that, it determines a lot about everything, about not just my faith, but my mental well-being, my attitude, my everything. And how I deal with that disappointment, it encompasses a lot. I mean, look at Joseph. Our text doesn't tell us what happened in Joseph's heart. But you've got to figure day after day, every time that cell door opened and they were bringing him food, he thought he was going home, he was getting out, he was going somewhere, right? I mean, I would. This guy left and told me he's going to remember me, and every day when that door opens, I'm thinking, here it goes, we're out of here now. And it's the same thing every day. And how do you respond to that? Well, I know people who that would send them into deep despair, right? And you know people even now who are still mad at God over some disappointment in their life, because it didn't go the way they wanted it to, and so therefore I'm mad at God. I'm gonna stay mad at God because God didn't do what I wanted him to. And sometimes it's about how do I handle that. Look at there's that little break between verse 23. Verse 23, yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. You notice in your Bible there's that little break, that little white spot. That little break represents 2 years in Joseph's life. 2 years of thinking, man, he's going to remember me today. It's not just a minute. So this is a long time. And here's what I find remarkable. Not that happens. Not that it happened to Joseph, because it happens to all of us. What sets Joseph apart is that what we see coming out of him at the other end is not a cynical, angry, bitter young man, but rather it's still a godly, mature man who still has a strong faith in God. Even though God's not doing what he wants him to do, he's still these 2 years in the dungeon really seemed to be a time of focus and learning for him. He comes out much more mature on the other side. He comes out much more grounded and I think a little bit less childish on the other side. And I think some of that comes with him having to figure out how to deal with this disappointment. Because when we come out the other side, that's the whole purpose of this series that we're starting, this Day 41 series. Because over the last 2 years, a lot of people, a lot of us, have had to deal with something. Loss of a loved one. There have been people who've walked away from jobs. There have been jobs who were sending you home and calling you back. There's all manner of things that people and there's a lot of people who are in that place of despair and disappointment right now. And coming out the other side, that how you deal with that makes all the difference. It's not just Joseph. Think about David. 1 Samuel 27, now I will perish one day by the hand of Saul. He is sure that if I don't get out of here, Saul's going to kill me. Now, think about this. This is the guy who a full 10 chapters before, and we don't know how much time there is, but it's 10 years or so, he was anointed and told he was going to be king. And now here he is, hiding in a cave in the middle of nowhere, fearing for his life. That is a time when it would be really easy to be mad at God. Well, what happened? Your prophet comes and tells me I'm going to be blessed and I'm going to be anointed and I'm going to be the king. And now here I am hiding in this cave while this crazy man tries to kill me. And so, again, it's how do you deal with that? I can go to the New Testament and talk about Paul. Paul, the trials when he went through Asia in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 8, that he despaired even of life. That I thought they were going to kill me is what he's saying. I was really thinking I was dead. And it would be really easy. I mean, I love the prosperity preachers nowadays quoting Philippians. It's like, that he's writing that from jail, right? He thinks that he's probably not going to ever see the outside world and he's going to die here. And you guys are talking about how he's writing about you're going to get a new Lexus. That's not what he's talking about. So disappointments are going to be inevitable in life, right? It's how we deal with them. If I can let God be God, not just in the good times, but in the bad times as well. In the times when I don't get the answer I want, in the times when I don't understand what's going on in my life. Sometimes the things that happen to me because of my own stupidity, because of my sinfulness, because of bad decisions that I make, whatever. And we all know that. But sometimes the things that happen to me in my life happen to me through no fault of my own, like Joseph. And it's real easy to go, why, Lord? Why me? Why me? And what's funny is, we're the people that commute every day back and forth to Houston going to a job, and the one day we have a flat on the interstate, we're standing on the side of the road going, why me, God? And the other 10,000 days that we drove safely from one place to another, we didn't say, why me? Why? I'm just saying we're a fickle people, and we don't say, and sometimes I think we should be saying, why not me? Why am I getting to make it from here to there when other people are not? Why am I making it through this when other people are not? And I think it comes back to faith. It's when faith is real. Do you really believe what you're saying, or is it just something that you go through the motions with? Because that's when it's put through the fire. And really, trust, that faith and that trust is the only thing that's going to bring you through those times of disappointment, right? That's what brings Joseph through on the other side. That's the only thing. He has no reason to believe that this guy's ever going to remember him. After 2 years, he has no reason to think that this guy is in any way going to, he has nothing left to hold on to, but he's still believing. He's still trusting. He's still faithful and hoping in God, even when there's no reason to hope in God. We're running out of time, and I've been talking too much. But this is not just not just pie in the sky, positive attitude, whatever you want to call it. Just think positive. That's not what I'm talking about. It's more about God is God, even when I don't understand it. God is still in control, even when I don't understand what he's doing. And I'm not going to understand what he's doing a lot of the time. And even when it seems like he's forgotten me, right? Even when it seems like he's forgotten me, God is still God. God is still in control. God still is. And if we don't learn anything else from the story of Joseph, we learn that sometimes God is at work and God has this plan that when Joseph is in the bottom of that well, do you think he's thinking that, I'm going, God's sending me to Egypt to save Israel from a famine? No. And it happens to a lot of us. We're in places and we don't know why we're here. And now, 20 years from now, we might can look back and say, well, this is why. Sometimes we can't, though. You can look back on things in your past and go, I still don't know why that happened. I still don't see any reason for it. And we may never, on this side of eternity, we may never even when we get there, because we're not going to care anymore. It's important to remember that God is always sovereign. God is always God. And that God is always good. God is never cruel and is never unfaithful. And even in my darkest circumstances, God's not, if you look at the pagan gods like the Greeks and all that, their gods would play with them and do things just to annoy them and just to torture them and just to, Yahweh, our God doesn't do that. There's no record of that ever happening. And God is not torturing us. He's not unfaithful. He's not cruel. There may be something going on that we don't understand and may never understand. But if we learn nothing else from Scripture, we learn that God is in control and God is always faithful to his promises and to his people. Always. And so even when I don't understand it, we talked about how way back in Abraham, when God's making these promises to Abraham, Abraham never lives to see that come to fruition. When he dies, he doesn't have more children than the sands on the seashore. He didn't live to see that. All nations are not blessed because of him. He didn't live to see that come to fruition. And there are things in our life that we may never understand and may not come to fruition until we're long gone. We may never see them. I'm running out of time and running out of steam, and I don't want to go a different direction because we will get off in something else. The last thing I think, and we'll end, is God is in control. God is always faithful, and the only thing we can control is me. I counsel people a lot, and people will come to me and like couples will come and they'll be like, well, she does this and she does that. She does this and she does that. And I wish she'd stop doing this. And I always have to stop them and say, okay, what do you do? Well, I don't do anything. I don't do that. Right? But you can't change her. You don't have the authority to change her behavior. And you sitting here accusing her is not making this any better. The only thing you can change is you. The only thing you have any control over is you. And so if you want to change your relationship, you need to change you and how you relate. That's the only way you're going to get anything. You can't say, I want you to do this. It's not going to work. The only thing you can change is you. And you can't be responsible for other people. Joseph could have become very angry towards this cupbearer, right? He could have burned with a hatred for this man because he let him stew in this prison for 2 years. And if we're honest, he's kind of got good reason. This guy promised him he was going to remember him. He didn't remember him. 2 years later, he calls him out. Now, Joseph could have responded in that moment by really lighting into this dude, but he doesn't. And because of that, he is blessed. right? It's how you relate. And the only thing I can control is me. I can't control whether you do what you say you're going to do. I can't control whether you do what you promised me you're going to do. And me being mad at you is not going to help me at all. I got to trust God, and I got to control my own reactions. And we'll leave with this story. Charles Spurgeon, the 19th century British preacher, says that he tells a story about riding home after a day's work. He was tired and depressed, and suddenly the verse flashed in his mind, "My grace is sufficient for you." He said, "I should think it is, Lord," and he burst out laughing. He said, "It seemed to make unbelief so absurd." He said, "It's as if some little fish, being very thirsty, was troubled and worried about drinking the river dry. And the river said, 'Drink away, little fish. My stream is sufficient for you.'" That phrase, "My grace is sufficient for you," I think can sustain us through a lot of these times. Because there are times when I don't understand what God's doing. And Paul is writing about one of those times when he writes that I got this thing that's tormenting me and I don't know why it's here. And God says, "My grace is sufficient for you." I'm enough. And that's what you got to worry about. Let's leave it right there because we're over time and there's people chomping at the bit to get in here. Thank you, guys. I'm sorry I preached too much this morning. We'll try to talk more next time. Take a break, and we'll be back in here in, now 12 minutes to worship together. Thank you.